Hi, I'm Matt O'Brien. I am the Deputy Executive Director of the Federation for American Immigration Reform. FAIR, as you may know, is the most significant immigration reform organization in the United States, and we take border security very seriously. So we went north to take a look at the border between the United States and Canada, and we have video of that trip to show to you.
Well, what have we seen today? Because I know we've kind of gone there, but you took us to the actual border.
That's right.
Which is, I noticed it was mowed on the U.S. side, and it was wheat on the Canada side.
Yeah, barley on the other side. Yeah, right. It was pretty interesting to see, and a lot of Amish people up there.
Like if you lost your balance, you'd fall into Canada.
Right. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And what I really thought was pretty interesting was the barriers, the concrete barriers with the wire across.
Yeah.
And they had two roads.
Yeah.
So it kind of keeps them from crossing the line.
And we see that down in the reservation in Arizona because there's no wall down there. And so they've put Normandy barriers or some of these cables and cement barriers to kind of stop the people from just driving the vehicles in. We've also went to the port of entry. We were able to see right there at the port of entry in Houlton.
Yeah.
They gave us a nice tour of that. The radiation checkpoints, the primary and secondary checkpoints, just all the work that's there. What are some of the challenges they were telling us about being so remote here in Maine? Some of these checkpoints are extremely remote.
Right, and but they do have drones. They have helicopter. They've got
which we saw today, buzzed our tower.
Flew right over us. That was pretty awesome. And they have several checkpoints in the areas that they keep an eye on. They've got a lot of technology that can spot a lot of areas where they do try to make entry, and they've been very successful. One thing they did say that they really need that camaraderie between them and the state police, the sheriffs, the municipal as well.
The big thing that's been all over the news is obviously the immigration issues, the border issues. We see a lot of what's happening in the southern border. We get to talk about what happens in Texas in particular because it's very open there to be able to see what's going on. But there's a lot of challenges here on the northern border that people don't get to talk about. You having worked that side with the enforcement, what big challenges have you seen that aren't really being talked about when it comes to the northern border?
I think with Maine, we get the same types of threats, particularly from either a illegal immigration standpoint or from a drug smuggling standpoint. It just is a matter of scale, right? So, Maine has a population of about 1.2, 1.3 million. And so a smaller drug seizure or a smaller amount of organized crime would actually affect our communities much more because our communities are just smaller. I think, when it comes to from an immigration standpoint, I think the new administration, their policies are not, these aren't radical changes when it comes to immigration enforcement. These are a return to pre-existing laws passed by Congress that, it's a return to normal enforcement as opposed to a period of time when there was essentially no enforcement. It was an enforcement vacuum when it came to illegal immigration, particularly at the border.
But what efforts should be moving forward to help assist more and more the law enforcement side, the citizens, and everything else?
Smart policy, effective policy to stop or mitigate these problems would be policy that would incentivize communication and coordination between agencies. Law enforcement agencies are stronger when they work together. So in that case, task forces, for example, Maine has a very good and robust history of a drug task force that takes from sheriff's deputies, state police, municipal PD, in some case federal officers. I was assigned to it was called MDEA, Maine Drug Enforcement Agency, for 5 years, and it was a great relationship. I think mirroring that type of task force environment for other types of crimes, whether it's financial crimes or crimes against children, would be very, very effective. That's the kind of good policy that creates safer communities. not separating state, municipal law enforcement, creating laws that separate those law enforcement entities from, normal immigration enforcement entities.
So we toured the Border Patrol area. It was, a fantastic day actually going out there. What did you learn different that pretty much caught you by surprise, perhaps?
I think the breadth of different types of arrests that the Border Patrol is making, this is not, it's a different type of enforcement than the Southwest, where you're looking at primarily border crossings. I think the Border Patrol in the state of Maine is involved in a lot of domestic operations where they encounter, straight illegal aliens. You're looking at aliens who had visas, who overstayed, and then they're looking at aliens who have criminal convictions that had visas, are eligible for removal, but are serious threats to our communities. We're talking involved in drug trafficking, crimes against children, domestic violence. They have a very broad palette of types of arrests that they're conducting inside the state, and that they're on track to have a record year.
Now, when most people think of the border, they think of the southern border, they think of the desert, they think of the heat. But Maine's a border state, and it has one of the larger state borders with Canada. So can you talk about why it is so important to the citizens of Maine to have good border security?
Well, with the southern border being shut down as tightly as it is, thank you, President Trump, and for all the hard work that's being done down there, that's pushing more people into the northern into Canada and coming in through that way. We have a lot of border crossings. Last year I did a trip to the Jackman border crossing on the western western border of Maine. This time here we're in Houlton on the eastern border. And it's incredibly important that we keep it secure to make sure not only that the immigration is taken care of, but drug traffic is huge for us. We have drugs are out of control in our state. Fentanyl is out of control. We've got illegal triad Chinese marijuana that's popping up everywhere. Over 300 that we've been able to identify. Chinese triad grow operations. They come in, they use federal qualifying funds, federal guaranteed funds, which are CDFI, from a community development financial institution. We found 60 of them that are being financed with federally guaranteed loans.
Thank you for putting this tour together, because this was my first time to the northern border. And I've always said, I'm concerned about who comes across the northern border. And I think you guys have done a great job in Maine, really kind of shining a light on just how this has affected your state. I know we were kind of just briefly talking offline, and I just had some sheriffs on and some folks from Oklahoma. Wow. And one of the challenges that they had in Oklahoma was the amount of marijuana grows. And I was just talking to the senator that mentioned the marijuana grows. Are you guys seeing that problem here in Maine as well?
So in the town of Sydney, the population is about 4,500 people. We have no less than 4. One of them, the town has taken back because the Chinese don't pay their property taxes, so we've taken that property from them.
So it's Chinese that are actually doing that?
Yes, specifically Chinese. And within that property, there were hydroponic grows, there was lighting. The neighbors talked about a U-Haul truck every 4 weeks arriving at this property to take the marijuana out. The problem in the state of Maine is marijuana is legal. And the state of Maine now is issuing licenses to these illegal grows. And I'm not sure why they're thinking that that's the way to go, other than the state is lacking revenue, and this is another way for the state to collect more revenue. But, having free labor is not the way that I think the state should create revenue.
Right. And that's kind of what they've created here. Oklahoma was having the same problem. Now that I hear you talking about it, they had a huge influx of Chinese coming in. Yeah. And just to put it into perspective, the state of Arkansas, right next door, had 8 grows throughout the entire state. Oklahoma, over 2,000 grows. Yeah. So it sounds like you guys in Maine are kind of on your way more towards the Oklahoma type, which isn't a good problem to have. And just looking at this landscape, I mean, you could stick a marijuana grow back in these woods and it would be very hard to find, especially if you didn't have some level of aviation support or any of that.
Yeah. So in the state of Maine, there's 300 to 400 known marijuana grows. What the Chinese do is they will buy a property that's inexpensive and they will literally gut it out. So currently Maine has a housing issue. And this is part of the reason. There's 300 or 400 houses that are growing marijuana within the house itself, and those properties are no longer available for purchase. So even though we've taken back a property in the town of Sydney, we can't sell that property until we know that any of the chemicals that the Chinese have used and the mold that's growing in these houses have been taken care of. Likely this property will just end up being demolished.
So tell us about remittances and why you sponsored a bill on them.
All right. Well, remittances were, in a blue state, a way to tackle illegal immigration as a whole, to really try to see what was happening in our state, to make sure that we were looking at the money being sent out of our state, which can in turn combat drug trafficking and money going back to cartels from the state, really trying to track down who's operating in our state illegally, because if they don't file their taxes, then they're going to pay into that system and have some paper trail so we can figure out who's in our state, because we don't know who came to Maine. Maine wasn't exactly a hub everybody walked across the border, but they're here because they continued to come up the East Coast, and we offer great social services. So we find ourselves with a lot of immigrants that we're not sure if they should be here or not.
And so remittances are the payments that migrants send home to their home country, and that's all money that's flowing out of the U.S. economy, correct?
Correct, and it's money they've earned under the table, something that hasn't been taxed already, so they can't prove that this was money that they should have had. And they're not paying into the system, which they definitely are using.
Are there any other bills you're working on to kind of increase border security or lessen the effects of unchecked mass migration on the state of Maine?
Well, right now our biggest focus is LD 1971, which is a bill that is still sitting, waiting hopefully for the governor to veto it within 3 days of our next session, which starts on January 7th. We are putting all of our energy, all of our talking points, anything we can at that bill so that Maine doesn't become a sanctuary state. We have hope that our governor will veto it, but she's terming out. So who knows what will happen. The pressure of the Democrats, they want that bill. They don't believe that illegal immigration is harming Maine when we clearly see people dying on our streets because of illegal immigrants. We see, crime increasing, and we need to get a handle on it. And LD 1971 won't allow us to do that.
FAIR went up to the northern border in late August, and we had a very special tour with some legislators up there. And the northern border is quite a bit different than what we're used to seeing on the southern border, which has been secured under President Trump. What did you think of that trip?
It was pretty amazing. When you look at the wall that's along the southern border and all of the electronic sensors and the presence of the Border Patrol, it's a very different scene up north. There's essentially boundary markers and trees, and that's it. And that's a huge national security risk.
Yeah, because we're used to seeing that big, beautiful wall that Trump built down on the southern border that's been mostly completed. And we went with these Maine legislators. We went with about 6 Maine legislators. And they coordinated this trip with Border Patrol. And it was an interesting time because you saw Mennonite, you saw farmland, you saw barley. It was just nothing much else.
It's rugged like the southern border, but it's rugged in a different way. The southern border is very dry and inhospitable. In the spring or the summer, this is fairly easy to pass through. In the winter, probably not so much unless you were on a snowmobile. But regardless of the season, it's literally like people talk about a line in the sand, or in this case, the grass, with boundary markers and a few small cement and wire vehicle traps. But other than that, it's the longest undefended border in the world, and Canada and the United States have had such good relations for so long, there hasn't been any need to engage in significant policing. But the numbers of people coming unlawfully over the border are creeping up, largely because the southern border has been so effectively closed. Now everyone from cartels to terrorists are trying to look to exploit holes in Canadian immigration law so they can get into Canada and then walk across the border in these places that have very low population density. I mean, it's hard to overstate how rural this area was and how far we were from any major population centers.
We hope that you enjoyed these videos about the northern border and really got a sense of what it was like. If you would like to become involved with FAIR, we encourage you to visit our website at www.fairus.org and become engaged. We would love to bring you more programming like this, and we need your help to do so.